Ice. The ancestral greatsword of House Stark is a massive two-handed weapon made from Valyrian steel. It is 1.46 meters long, taller than an adolescent Robb Stark. Its handle is white in color and its blade is as dark as smoke and as wide as a man's hand. Spellforged in Valyria roughly 400 years before the reign of Robert Baratheon, Ice was named for the legacy of the Age of Heroes. Unlike most Valyrian steel swords, which were forged for combat, Ice was too large to be wielded in battle and instead served as a ceremonial blade, used primarily for executions. In the year 129 AC, the Dance of the Dragons plunged Westeros into war, with the Black Queen Rhaenyra summoning the banners of a young Lord Cregan Stark. Ice was the deliverer of swift Stark justice, embodying the idea that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Cregan believed that those who conspired against and opposed Rhaenyra Targaryen were turncloaks, whose fate was already sealed. When Cregan rode south, he executed former members of the Green Council, Sir Giles Belgrave and Larys Strong. It was Ice that sent them to their fates. Ice remained with the Starks and is seen in the very first episode of Game of Thrones, wielded by Ned Stark. With it, Ned executes a condemned man. When Ned is betrayed by members of the Small Council, Ice is taken by Sir Ilyn Payne, who then uses it to execute Ned himself, kicking off the War of the Five Kings. The weapon remained unused at King's Landing until Lord Tywin seized the opportunity for House Lannister to have their very own Valyrian steel weapon. Ice meets its end in Season 4, or, for the book readers, in A Storm of Swords. The blade was so great in size that two smaller swords were able to be crafted from it. Their names? Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail. Oathkeeper. When the two swords were forged by Tobbo Mott at Tywin Lannister's request, one of them was named Oathkeeper. Its blade is a gray-black and has red ripples through the steel, with the red running almost as deep as the gray. The scabbard glitters gold and is decorated with a row of lions' heads and rubies. Tywin was known to have been seeking a Valyrian steel sword of his own for many years. He had offered huge amounts of gold as a bounty for one after the Lannisters' Valyrian blade disappeared, which we'll get into later in the video. His search came to an end when he got his hands on Ice. Tywin presented Oathkeeper to his son Jaime, though Jaime takes this gesture as an insult, mocking him for his missing hand. In a final attempt to honor the promise he made to Catelyn Stark to return her daughters safely, Jaime gives the sword to Brienne of Tarth, charging her with finding their whereabouts. In recognition of Jaime's commitment to his vow, Brienne names the blade Oathkeeper. From then on, Brienne wields Oathkeeper, cutting down anyone who stands between her and her oath. Brienne's quest brings about the deaths of many soldiers and one failed king, Stannis Baratheon, along with countless White Walkers, whose ice blades are no match against the Valyrian weapon. In the end, the blade remains in Brienne's possession, now as a member of the Kingsguard, her oath having been kept. And if you like the video so far, why not give it a thumbs up? Widow's Wail. This blade is the other half of Ice and the twin of Oathkeeper. Unlike its greatsword counterpart, it is a long sword forged for combat. Though similar in appearance, it is lighter, half an inch narrower, and 3 inches shorter, while still retaining the same magic and razor-sharp edge. Widow's Wail was presented by Tywin Lannister to King Joffrey, replacing his Heart-Eater blade. Joffrey's only victim with the Valyrian sword was a book gifted by Tyrion Lannister. After Joffrey's death, the blade's fate diverges between book and series. In the series, the sword passes to Jaime Lannister, who can wield it one-handed due to its lighter weight. He carries it in Dorne during the attempt to rescue Myrcella, later fighting Daenerys' forces in Season 7 and aiding in the war against the White Walkers. After the Battle of King's Landing and Jaime's death beside his sister, the sword's fate is unknown. In the novels, the sword sees little use and is kept from Tommen Baratheon until he is old enough to wield it. Moving back to the north, next we find ourselves following the arc of Jon Snow. Longclaw is the ancestral Valyrian steel bastard sword. It's half a foot longer than a standard longsword, tapered to thrust as well as slash, with 3 fullers incised into the blade to reduce its weight. It has a black handle with a pale carved stone on the pommel in the shape of a wolf's head. The wolf was carved specifically to represent Jon Snow's Stark lineage. The blade contains ripples in its dark steel, one of the hallmarks of a Valyrian sword. The Mormonts held Longclaw for over 500 years, though its use during that time is poorly documented. By the start of the main story, Jeor Mormont had already passed the sword to his son Jorah when he joined the Night's Watch. After Jorah disgraced the house by selling poachers to slavers, he fled and left the sword behind. Longclaw was returned to Jeor, who set it aside, a painful reminder of his son's shame. In Season 1, Jeor's life is saved from a white attack by Jon Snow. In the struggle, fire damages Longclaw's hilt, melting the silver bear pommel and burning the grip and crossguard. After recovering the blade from the ashes, Jeor has the Night's Watch repair it, replacing the pommel with a snarling wolf to reflect Jon's heritage. Weighted with lead and refitted with leather, the sword is then given to Jon, whom Jeor notes is fittingly a bastard wielding a bastard sword. Longclaw accompanies Jon throughout his battles. At Hardhome, Jon faces a White Walker whose ice weapon shatters ordinary steel. When Longclaw holds firm, Jon realizes Valyrian Steel can kill them and slays the Walker with 2 swift blows. At the story's end, Jon travels north with the wildlings, Longclaw still at his belt. Heartsbane. If any Valyrian steel sword rivals ice in size, it is Heartsbane, the great sword of House Tarly, and one of the few such blades in the Reach. Guarded closely for centuries, its design reflects the Tarly huntsman's sigil, with a hilt shaped like a bow and arrow fletching, a bow-like crossguard, and a plain wooden scabbard that evokes the forest. During Robert's Rebellion, Randyll Tarly, Lord of House Tarly, carried Heartsbane while leading the vanguard against Robert Baratheon. He won a decisive victory at the Battle of Ashford, the only battle Robert ever lost, and later used the sword to behead Lord Caffrin, sending the head to the Mad King as proof of loyalty. The act cemented Tarly's reputation as a ruthless and effective commander. In Season 6, after a humiliating dinner at Horn Hill, Samwell Tarly steals the greatsword. On the eve of the Battle of Winterfell, he gifts it to the redeemed Jorah Mormont, believing it belongs with a true warrior and honoring the bond he shared with Jorah's father, Jeor. Jorah wields Heartsbane effectively against the undead before dying in battle. The sword's fate after the war remains unknown. We like to think Sam brought it with him south when he became Grand Maester. Leave a comment down below to let us know what you think. Blackfyre. Blackfyre is the fabled hand-and-a-half longsword once wielded by Aegon the Conqueror, creator of the Iron Throne. The more famous of House Targaryen's 2 ancestral swords, it traditionally passed to the monarch seated upon the Iron Throne. The sword was brought from Valyria when the Targaryens fled to Dragonstone just over a century before the conquest, and was already old when Aegon used it to conquer Westeros from 2 BC to 4 AC. During the conquest, Aegon carried Blackfyre into battle, killing a champion of House Toland in Dorne. Blackfyre later passed to his son Aenys, who, no warrior, gifted it to his half-brother, Maegor the Cruel. As king, Maegor lived up to his name, beheading Grand Maester Gowyn and wielding the sword during his trial of 7 against the warrior's sons, slaying Daemon Morrigan and William the Wanderer. He later used Blackfyre to kill Myros for opposing his marriage to Tyanna of Pentos, and personally executed 7 warrior sons who refused the Night's Watch. Among Maegor's many killings, his most infamous was when he used the blade to cut out Tyanna's heart, after she poisoned the children of his other wives. Years later, King Jaehaerys Targaryen wore Blackfyre at his belt. He used it to slay Boris Baratheon during the Third Dornish War in 61 AC. In another incident, Sir Braxton Beesbury demanded a trial by combat, which the king accepted on the condition that Braxton face him personally. Believing Jaehaerys too old to prevail, Braxton was swiftly proven wrong when the king used Blackfyre to take his head. Later, Aegon Targaryen II wielded Blackfyre to legitimize his claim to the Iron Throne. Some years later, the sword passed to Daeron Targaryen, who sought to bring Dorne into the realm by force. Though his campaign initially succeeded, resistance endured. In 161 AC, Daeron met the Dornish beneath a peace banner, believing they would submit, only to be betrayed and killed with Blackfyre in hand. Blackfyre's whereabouts were unknown for several years until the reign of King Aegon IV, known as the Unworthy. In 182 AC, Aegon legitimized all his bastard children, largely to spite his lawful heir. One of them, Daemon Waters, was gifted Blackfyre, an act that founded House Blackfyre. Daemon wielded the sword in a famed duel against Sir Gawain Corbray, who bore the Valyrian blade Lady Forlorn. Daemon later died in battle. His son Aemon briefly carried Blackfyre before falling almost immediately. Daemon's half-brother Aegor Rivers, known as Bittersteel, recovered the sword and attempted to rally the rebels, but failed after a duel with his half-brother Brynden Rivers. Bittersteel fled to the Free Cities with Blackfyre, where he founded the Golden Company. The sword never returned to Westeros, and is believed by some to have passed to Meleys the Monstrous, the last Blackfyre pretender. After 260 AC, Blackfyre's fate remains unknown. Dark Sister. Although Aegon is remembered for uniting Westeros, he was not always at the tip of the spear. That role often fell to his elder sister, Visenya Targaryen, who wielded Dark Sister. Likely forged in Valyria before the Doom, the sword had been in Targaryen hands for centuries before their arrival on Dragonstone. Slightly smaller than Blackfyre and designed for a woman's hand, Dark Sister was used by Visenya in combat. During the First Dornish War, assassins sent to King's Landing attempted to kill the siblings, but Visenya cut them down in Aegon's defense. When Aegon later claimed he was adequately protected, Visenya drew Dark Sister and slashed his cheek before the guards could react. Soon after, Aegon entrusted her with forming the first Kingsguard in 10 AC. After Visenya's death, Dark Sister passed to her son, Maegor Targaryen, though he favored Blackfyre. Following his reign, Alyssa Velaryon fled Dragonstone with the blade and presented it to a young Jaehaerys Targaryen I, affirming his claim to the throne. Jaehaerys carried Dark Sister at Storm's End in 48 AC, but once crowned, the sword fell into disuse. A generation later, one of his sons, Balon, known as Balon the Brave, wielded Dark Sister in 92 AC to avenge the death of his brother, Prince Aemon. Balon later died of appendicitis, leaving the sword unused once more. An aging Jaehaerys then entrusted Dark Sister to the young Daemon Targaryen, who carried it for many years. During this time, Daemon used the blade in the War of the Stepstones, most notably to behead Kragus Drahar. In 115 AC, he also defeated the Braavosi betrothed of his future wife, Laena Velaryon, with the sword. During the Dance of the Dragons, Daemon, riding Caraxes, fought Aemon Targaryen atop Vhagar in one of the greatest dragon duels ever fought. Leaping between dragons midair, Daemon skewered Aemon and drove Dark Sister into his eye. When both dragons fell, Daemon vanished and the sword remained lodged in Aemon's skull beneath the lake. Dark Sister was later recovered, likely by local houses, and eventually passed to Aemon Targaryen, known as the Dragon Knight. Wielding the blade, he became famed as the greatest swordsman of his age. After his assassination, Dark Sister passed to Brynden Rivers. He never used it in battle, preferring his weirwood longbow, but he still carried it as a symbol of office. Brynden eventually joined the Night's Watch, and in 252 AC, he and the sword vanished beyond the wall while on a range. Its whereabouts are unknown. Brightroar. A great sword comparable in size to ice, this became House Lannisters in the century before the Doom of Valyria. The Lannisters are thought to have paid an amount of gold for it that would have been enough to raise an army. Lancel Lannister IV beheaded the king, Harold Half-Drowned of the Iron Islands, with it. Lancel also wielded the blade against Sir Wilbert Osgrey, according to some reports. Records of its use throughout the centuries are very limited. It was last seen in the hands of King Tommen II during the Century of Blood. Tommen set sail for the ruins of Valyria, intending to plunder its lost wealth and sorceries. Neither his fleet nor its king ever returned, and Brightroar was lost with them. The last Lannister to search for the sword was Tyrion's uncle, Garyon. In 291 AC, he set out to recover Brightroar for the Lions of the Rock, but like Tommen before him, he never returned. Lady Forlorn. The ancestral Valyrian blade of House Corbray of the Vale of Arryn. Its name commemorates the coming of the Andals and the house's role in that conquest. Like its sister swords, the blade bears a smoky gray hue, while a heart-shaped ruby set into the pommel glints like a falling red tear. The blade's name predates the Valyrian sword itself. Robar Royce II, High King of the First Men and the Vale, bore a weapon of the same name after slaying Kyle Corbray, King of the Fingers. Centuries later, the Corbrays acquired the Valyrian blade and named it in honor of that ancient sword. Lord Carl Corbray wielded Lady Forlorn to kill Ser Davos Darklyn of the Kingsguard during the battle beneath the God's Eye in 43 AC, later threatening Lord Rhaegar Baratheon when Rhaegar proposed replacing King Jaehaerys with Princess Aeria Targaryen. Nearly a century later, Sir Corwyn Corbray carried Lady Forlorn during the Dance of the Dragons, but was slain by a crossbowman at Runestone in 134 AC after drawing the blade on Lord Gunthor Royce. By the time of the Blackfyre Rebellion, the sword belonged to Sir Gawain of the Kingsguard, who fought Demon Blackfyre in 196 AC. Sir Gawain was defeated, but survived. Lord Corbray then used the sword during Robert's Rebellion in 283 AC. When he was wounded, his son Lyn took up the sword and avenged his father. Red Rain. Unlike many noble houses, House Drum of Old Wick came to possess the Valyrian steel sword Red Rain through cunning rather than lineage, after Hilmar Drum seized it from an unnamed armored knight using only his wits and a wooden cudgel. Fans have speculated that the fallen knight may have been a member of House Rain of Castamere, whose sigil was a red lion. The theory suggests Hilmar Drum either killed the knight during a raid or slew a Rain opponent in a tourney. The sword itself never appears in the television series and is mentioned only in the fourth novel, A Feast for Crows. Nightfall. Another Valyrian blade of the Iron Islands. This sword belongs to House Harlaw of Harlaw Island and is distinguished by a moonstone pommel, an unusual feature among Valyrian swords. House Harlaw is among the island's most prominent families, second only to the Greyjoys. The sword's history is tied to Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, who sided with the Blacks during the Dance of the Dragons and led devastating raids along the Reach and the Westerlands. During this period, Dalton slew a Corsair lord and claimed the Valyrian steel sword Nightfall from his victim. Though Dalton kept the blade as a trophy of House Greyjoy, it was later lost and eventually came into the possession of Sir Harys Harlaw. Like Red Rain, Nightfall does not appear in the television series Game of Thrones, but is wielded during the Taking of the Shields, a campaign led by Euron Greyjoy in the books. Orphan-Maker. Some Valyrian weapons belong to houses that are no longer. One such blade is Orphan-Maker, formerly the Valyrian steel sword of House Roxton, a noble house of the Reach. Though House Roxton is largely extinct by the present era, Orphan-Maker gained infamy during the Targaryen Civil War and its aftermath for the carnage it inflicted. During the Dance of the Dragons, Sir John Roxton sided with the Greens and wielded the blade in battle, earning a fearsome reputation. At the Battle on the Honeywine, he used Orphan-Maker to kill Lord Owen Costane of the Blacks. After surviving the First Battle of Tumbleton, John grew increasingly brutal, splitting Lord Footley of Tumbleton in two and later slaying Sir Hugh Hammer, a Dragonseed turncloak during the Second Battle of Tumbleton in 131 AC. After Roxton's death, the sword passed to Lord Unwin Peake of the Reach. Following the dance, Unwin became Hand of the King, publicly drawing Orphan-Maker at court and declaring that, unlike the previous Hand, he could still swing a sword. The blade is absent from later timelines, with some suggesting it was lost or deliberately hidden at Starpike. Vigilance. The High Towers possessed their very own Vigilance, a Valyrian steel sword befitting their proud lineage. Its name reflects the words, "We light the way," suggesting ever-watchful guardianship. True to its name, Vigilance saw action in the defense of Old Town. During the dance, Lord Ormond Hightower, who sided with the Greens, carried Vigilance into battle. After the Battle of the Honeywine, Ormond knighted Prince Daeron Targaryen after he turned the tide in their favor from atop his dragon Tessarion. Not long after, Ormond was killed by Roderick Dustin, Lord of Barrowton. The histories do not record the ultimate fate of Vigilance. Speculation suggests it was taken and sold by some common soldier, possibly retrieved by a Hightower soldier and sent to Old Town, or forever lost in mud and blood. Lamentation. Lamentation was the famed Valyrian steel sword of House Royce, flickering only briefly before tragedy claimed it. Fittingly, its name evokes grief and mourning. In 130 AC, as King's Landing rebelled against Rhaenyra, the 7 knights who rode, led by William Royce and the Blade, took to the streets. They were trying to restore order and rescue Joffrey Valerian, Rhaenyra's son, who fell from her dragon. They fought their way toward the dragon pit through an enraged mob. During the storming of the dragon pit, William was killed when a man leapt from a rooftop onto his back. The sword was seized by rioters and carried off as the city drowned in blood, men and dragons alike, and it was never seen again. Cat's Paw. This Valyrian steel dagger first appears when it is used in an attempt to kill Brandon Stark. Though the smallest on this list, the dagger's story bridges the ancient Targaryen prophecy and the climax of the War for the Dawn. In House of the Dragon, the show revealed that the dagger originally belonged to Aegon. The blade is inscribed with a prophecy that from Aegon's blood will come the prince that was promised, and his will be the Song of Ice and Fire. The prophecy foreshadows the Great War against the White Walkers during the Long Night. The dagger passes through several hands across the Game of Thrones story, beginning with the assassination attempt on Bran Stark, before traveling with Catelyn Stark to King's Landing, and ultimately coming into Arya Stark's possession. It originally belonged to Peter Baelish, who used it to sow conflict between the Starks and Lannisters. After Ned Stark's arrest, Baelish reclaims the blade, returned to him by Catelyn, and presses it beneath Ned's chin. Baelish later presents the dagger as a gift to Tyrion Lannister, who recognizes that Baelish is lying about its ownership. In the novels, Baelish eventually becomes Lord Protector of the Vale while still possessing the blade. Though its role diminishes in the later books, the dagger's significance is greatly expanded in the television series. Seeking to gain favor, Baelish offers the dagger to Bran in Season 7, who later passes it to Arya. That same season, Arya and Sansa uncover the truth behind Littlefinger's lies, deceptions that helped ignite the war and destroy their family, culminating in Arya executing him with the dagger. In the following season, during the Battle of Winterfell, Arya becomes the hero of the Long Night. Fighting through the undead in the Godswood, she kills the Night King with the dagger, bringing the Long Night to an end. That's it for our breakdown of every Valyrian weapon in Westeros. If you have made it this far, you should definitely check out our guide to all the Knights of Westeros. And make sure to hit subscribe for more upcoming Game of Thrones content. We'll see you in the next video.